Welcome to another episode of Presbyterian and Reformed Texas. We are joined today by Victor Martinez. Victor is the Associate Pastor of Mission and Cultural Engagement at Redeemer Presbyterian Church in San Antonio, Texas. Victor, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we are glad you're here with us. You are the first of the hopefully many guests to come from Redeemer San Antonio. You guys have a great history there, and I'd love to talk to more staff and elders ruling and teaching there, and get to know you brothers well. But tell us a little bit about yourself, if you would.
Yes, I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and grew up actually in the Presbyterian church over there, USA. That particular church was most definitely more of a liberal church, and it actually was quite involved in political and social issues that at the time were interesting, but later in life, not what our souls need as much. So I literally, that being my childhood church, I came to the States in 84 to go to school, and my plan was to attend Mississippi State, and I did not pass the TOEFL nor the English exam, so I ended up in a small junior college. So
Okay.
I hope I've gotten better since then. But and so by the Lord's grace, met some really godly people that for the first time ever shared with me the gospel of Christ, and I responded to that. The Lord really broke my heart and used the love of some really sweet people. And in Mississippi, being Mississippi, there were all kinds of people
Sure.
there. So there were some challenges, but by far, God's grace and mercy was really evident through his own people. And a lot of people saw an opportunity to share the gospel, not only with me, but through me. There were a lot of international students, and not many were actively being disciple or giving a witness of the gospel. So I was just cared for and loved very much. And from there, that was with Southern Baptists. And so from there, I went to seminary in Fort Worth at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, where I met my wife, future wife, and did church planting there, inner city Dallas, some really rough background stuff, but also, again, a great school to learn the gospel. And and after almost 8 years there, we went to Puerto Rico, and still with Southern Baptism, planted a church there as well. Also, unique urban context, and stay there 5-6 years. And from there, we receive a call by the North American Mission Board of the Southern Baptist Convention to be a catalytic missionary in New England. And so at that time, I was traveling quite a bit.
That's a little bit of a change.
Yeah, like
Puerto Rico, Mississippi, Texas, Puerto Rico. Hey, now we're going to New England, huh?
Yeah, we went from complaining about hot to complaining about being too cold. So
right,
it was quite amazing. So yeah, we did work there, teaching in seminary, also training church planners, and I was coordinating ethnic missions for the convention there at that time. And that was also a lot of good school, a lot of learning, good brothers and sisters. And from there, came to San Antonio to teach at, I thought I called to be a full-time professor at Baptist University of the Americas here.
Okay.
Taught there 7 years. And after that is when the Lord opened the doors in the PCA. So that's a quick trajectory of what it looked like.
Very good. So tell us a little bit more. I mean, how did the Lord lead you? I mean, you had all this experience in the Southern Baptist Convention. You went to one of their flagship seminaries. You were on the North American Mission Board. You're doing church planning. You find yourself in San Antonio. How do you become a member of the PCA?
Well, it's a great question. By the time I was in San Antonio, I was teaching theology and other biblical courses. I started really for the first time in a more significant way reading some of the Reform scholars and Presbyterian background. I
Hmm.
mean, and I started implementing some of those things in my book. By then, I consider myself a Reformed Baptist, although it really what that really meant was just I was a Calvinist.
Okay.
So, but I used in some of my courses Old Palmer Robertson's Christ of the Covenants.
Hmm.
Boy, it started right there. And so teaching that, I actually learned a lot and started kind of re-examining my positions and realizing, learning that reform meant more, and it meant ecclesiology, it meant missions and worship and all of that. So in teaching, I really became a student, and I remember there was a student in the seminary from Cuba, at the Baptist University of the Americas, the college there in San Antonio here. And I remember talking with her, and she made a couple of comments where you said, "Well, you're not a Baptist, you're a Presbyterian. You need to know that." And she was from Presbyterian background, so when I heard that kind of shook me a little bit, and I
Right.
excited at the same time. And so I really then began a trajectory of looking at the baptism and all of those things, and looking back at my ministry as a Baptist pastor for a long time. It was actually a good thing. And at that time, while all that is happening, I remember my family and I took a vacation to Denver, to Colorado, and there the first time ever I visited a PCA church there.
Okay.
Rocky Mountain Presbyterian at the time was Pastor Tyler Rico. And again, I mean, I was probably the only Hispanic they had seen in a long time. So, they came say hi to me after church, and Pastor Tyler Rico introduced himself. And when he heard San Antonio and that I was kind of interested in the PCA, well, he told me about Redeemer Presbyterian in San Antonio because his
Right.
son, who was in the Air Force, was attending here.
Okay.
So yeah, and so we came back to San Antonio, and I was actually an interim pastor at a church as well. But anytime I got a Sunday free, I told my wife and my kids, I just want to go visit this PCA church here. And I have to tell you that first time I showed up at Redeemer, I mean, it was quite almost like an existential thing. Because I mean, I remember being in tears during the worship, hearing the gospel, hearing worship expressed in a way that just touched my heart. I have to admit, I think I had my wife a little worried, at that
Right.
time. She said, "You're not quite in your 50s yet to be having this kind of crisis." And but the neatest thing was that something was connecting, and this was the first time I was seeing worship and seeing things coming out of a real reform way, and that was something I had not tasted, but I had been yearning for, and so that was quite amazing. And then, of course, when I met Tom Gibbs, the planter and pastor of Redeemer,
Hmm.
it literally felt like we had been looking for each other. And later I learned that was the case, and I connected really quickly with Tom, and immediately we started sharing our hearts and our vision, and it became evident that we should explore about me maybe being part of Redeemer in some way.
Hmm.
So I did, and one of the things that I learned later was that Tom would drive South San Antonio by BUA, the university there, and would pray for the Lord to send a Hispanic professor or someone to come and lead missions at Redeemer. And,
Wow.
and it was fascinating because from the very beginning, it felt to me like there was the Lord really was truly at work, and our hearts were being drawn and changed and impacted. And so that was just a really, really powerful thing.
Hmm.
and so very, very helpful. And one of the neat things was, of course, that Tom immediately, once we started kind of heading in that direction of maybe partnering together in ministry, he told me that, we've been praying for a Hispanic person to come, but you're not going to lead Hispanic ministry. We want a person like you to lead missions for all of Redeemer. And the fact that you have a different background will help and will do its unique things. But he really challenged me and saw me as someone that could lead Redeemer like that, and that Hispanic work would happen and it would come in its own time and its own way. So that was actually really big challenge to me, because to be honest, I had not preached in English all that much. It was always in Spanish. So, but anyway, that's how I came to Redeemer. And it's I've been there already going 16, 17 years. So it's
Oh,
amazing.
wow. So
Yeah.
you were at Redeemer in its first 10 years then, obviously. And
Yeah.
because you guys are what, like 25 years old or so, something like that?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. More like 23, but yeah, around
Okay.
there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And I know Tom Gibbs took the call to be president of Covenant Seminary. What did
Yeah.
2021? I think that was.
Yes.
And your current pastor, Paul Hahn,
Mm-hmm.
came in, and you all have somewhat of a unique arrangement
Mm-hmm.
with your pastorate there with Paul and Matt
Mm-hmm.
um, being I guess Matt is actually listed as co-pastor, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating because they everybody, the whole church wanted to keep Matt because of
Mm-hmm.
his preaching and his giftedness. But he's fairly young in the ministry, even though he's so gifted. And it was fascinating because after an initial interview with Paul himself kind of withdrew his name and said, I'm kind of more at the end of my years, so maybe this is not a good fit. And the pulpit committee, praying and speaking, decided, like, well, what about if we bring, instead of one senior pastor, we bring a lead pastor and a co-lead pastor.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, Paul is in a good place to where he's mentoring, helping Matt, and that way we also had Matt doing his ministry with us. So it was just a neat thing how it worked out.
Yeah, and we share a commonality in that, because we different circumstances, but we find ourselves at Trinity Plano with co-pastors as well. We had a situation, pastor resignation, and Jeff Morrow was at that point 2 years as an assistant, and Jake Yohanan, who was ordained in North Texas, had served at Trinity, then was doing church planting in New York with Tim Keller and Redeemer Manhattan up there. He and his family had moved back to town, but he was still going back to the New York area and working with the churches he was helping plant up there. And it was a unique situation where it was like, well, again, we have a gifted man who's young in the ministry. You have somebody who's been at this church before, somebody who loves this church, and it's like it's a unique situation. And we're now, well, that was 2018, so we're 6 years, almost 6 years into this. And there's been some refining of roles and everything, but I think as a whole, it's worked out very good for us. And I'm sure, that you guys have a similar experience. I would hope you guys have a similar experience, that it's worked out well. And obviously, it's not. We know nothing is forever, and the Lord, will certainly have plans for his churches in the future, but for now, for us, it works, and I pray that does for you as well.
Yeah. I think it's actually a neat model. I certainly could see where it may not work everywhere. You really need unique and really humble leadership. You just with a heart of service. But at the same time, I think it's a great way to prepare younger pastors, and I love to see that working as well in other places. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So how big is Redeemer? What I know you have two services, so you're obviously bigger than we are. We're 250 or so members and comfortably fit in one service. But
Yeah.
what does Redeemer look like?
Yeah. So we have, I think, membership is kind of 850, maybe approaching 900.
Okay.
And attendance, yeah, I would say about 800. I don't think it quite gets to 9 yet. But in attendance, I think in any given Sunday, with both services, we may get 500 or, somewhere around that, little more little than that. Yeah.
And you, Redeemer is just off the Riverwalk there in San Antonio. So you are an urban church.
Yes, by intention, by desire. A lot of churches in San Antonio, I mean, for a long time, going back years, as this happened in many cities, the city is spreading out, growing away from downtown or the centers of culture there. And so San Antonio is actually quite wide. It just goes out. But right around that time, providentially, nobody knew, but the downtown area and the real estate in the urban core was 4 or 5 years from exploding. Nobody knew that at the time. And we found this right by 35, right there inside of downtown. We found an old YMCA building that had been abandoned for several years. And so, I mean, the price we paid for that, it was just a gift compared to what that would be today. So people sometimes would ask us, how did you figure all that out? And we were like, we didn't. We were just fortunate by the Lord's grace. And that is the truth. I mean, urban dwelling has just exploded all around us. And it's been amazing how the reversal of how the city is now growing and where it's going. So it's really exciting.
Very cool. Very cool. So you're the church, as I said, you guys have two morning services. Was it 9:15 and 11? Pretty typical times. Are they identical services?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very good. And how often do you get to preach, being the third man on the totem pole?
Yeah. I'm actually preaching a lot less at Redeemer now. And so some of that has been due to health reasons. But outside of Redeemer, I continue being pretty busy preaching. And I go to Monterey or Mexico a couple of times a year, 3 times a year, actually. And I enjoy a lot preaching in Spanish and training church planners. And that's one of the neat things about being here is that with my calling and the blessing of the church, I was encouraged to look to the South and build partnerships and help in training, just be learning about how the Lord's working and so forth. And with the demographics the way they are and the way history has been going here, turned out that was really strategic. And so we really have a really neat relationships, partnerships. And right now, one of the interesting things, and I think this is worth mentioning, was that, like I said earlier, Tom said he was very, very focused on that. He said they're gonna at the beginning see you as the guy that's going to lead Hispanic ministries, but we want to try to see if you actually lead the whole church in missions, and out of that, different kinds of ministry come and I mean that was a challenge even for me, just to I was like overwhelmed by that, or like, can I even do it? But it was actually a great decision, and in fact, we decided that we were not gonna immediately launch into creating a Spanish-speaking ministry or focus in that way because really, when you look at the demographics of San Antonio, I mean, it's like 65, 66% Hispanic. So
Right.
Hispanic is the majority. And so it's a culture that is actually pretty well integrated for the most part. I still think, there is some segregation that as it is in many, many, many cities throughout the country. But San Antonio is a place where Hispanics just see themselves as part of the culture and the society here. And there are a lot more English speaking Hispanics than there are Spanish speaking, although there's a lot of those as well. So, but the idea was let's first grow diverse
Mm-hmm.
and multi ethnic before we start trying to do Spanish specific things.
Right.
And I think that was brilliant, and that was just a wisdom from the Lord. And so, in the last 2-3 years, we made a partnership with City to City, and we created a program here called Latin American Pastor Fellow.
Okay.
That was the first time that we had any title, any ministry intentionally focusing on Hispanic. And as this brother came, he's Spanish speaking, church planner, very gifted. He came from Monterey, where he had planted a church there. And so the idea is this 2-year program would allow some cross pollination and us learning and connecting with Mexico, but also the other way around. City to City thought that we could kind of teach and also encourage certain things of ministry to their guys. But what ended up happening is that this brother began. He was a Spanish speaker primarily, so we said, okay, preach in Spanish, share in Spanish, evangelize, disciple, and we already had a few that were mostly Spanish speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, basically in the last 3 years that he's been here, he's ended up. He's going to stay now, and we just called him. We're just about to call him as a director of Spanish speaking ministries.
Okay.
Yeah, we're looking for him to transfer his credentials, and so that Spanish speaking part of Redeemer is just growing rapidly and quickly.
Yeah. Very cool. One thing that I probably should mention or ask you about is your involvement with the Hispanic Leadership Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about that, if you would.
Yeah. So, I mean, going back, I think it's been like 11, maybe 12 years. At that time, Josh Geiger, Manuel Padilla, Josh Geiger, of course, is in Dallas at Cristo Rey at that time. And then Manuel Padilla was a Hispanic pastor in El Paso, Las Tierras, and over there. So and we had a couple of other guys. We just noticed that there was no pipeline for Hispanic future leaders to be trained or be brought, mentor, disciple. In fact, you could hardly find them. And so, I mean, when I came into the BCA, I think there were maybe 12, 13 ordained teaching elders, Hispanic. There wasn't that many.
Mm-hmm.
But we felt like we needed to do something more. So we kind of joined forces and got together, and we had the support at the time of the Southwest Church Planting Network there. And so we launched Hispanic Leadership Initiative as a way to encourage the churches to look to Hispanics to evangelize, but also to disciple. And then we would help the churches with that, with ideas and prayer. But then also we ourselves would be about recruiting and who are the future potential leaders that we see already. And with the challenge of the BCA is that we're just so behind the ball at that time, and even though we've made great strides forward, we're still a little behind. But basically, created a way to call potential leaders that were identified at the churches in the area, going all the way to even parts of New Mexico. And so we began these retreats and these conferences. And we were getting 100 people coming. Of course, a lot of those were Anglo guests that we wanted there because, it needs to be open up to everybody and anybody.
Right.
to help. Its intention is Hispanic focus, but we think that it's going to take all of God's people, regardless of ethnicity. So yeah, that has become a very just useful and something the Lord has really used.
Hmm. Very good. Yeah, I know Haziel can too
Yes,
here in Dallas, and he's a good man, and I know his involvement there with you and
yes.
that, and so awesome. Well, one of the other things you're involved in is the work of MNA,
Hmm.
the Mission to North America, and MNA is hosting a Mercy conference that is coming up in April, the 12th and 13th in Dallas, and it's an event called Restore 2024. MNA describes it as the conference will recast a vision for kingdom centered mercy ministry and equip deacons, ministry leaders, and lay people to enter the restorative work of mercy. Would you like to talk about that and how did this come about? Do you know the background story on this? And
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the first one to talk to me about it was Robbie Mills,
okay,
and so he mentioned that they had Brian Fikkert and also Irwin Ince
right.
guest, and they said, "We'd love for you to be kind of that the third guy that would come here and help us and speak from none of us are experts, but we have experience and we've done things the wrong way plenty of times enough to be able
Right.
to help some." So yeah, and so I think it's very exciting because I mean Irwin, myself, and Ficker there. I think you're gonna get guys that not only have experience but they have a really rich understanding of not only the church but the kingdom and how that works, how that happens, and I think that we, as in the PCA and other Reformed Presbyterian traditions, we have a rich theological tradition and understanding on the kingdom and
Mm-hmm.
ecclesiology. And my goodness, that is what a heritage and what a blessing. But I think we have been challenged for different reasons with what does that look like in terms of God's kingdom. And I think personally, the way I began to understand all of that was helpful because having finally gotten a hold of that rich tradition when I did, that really gave me that theological vision and foundation that you need. And one of the things Tom would always say to us was that the our doctrines are crucial, they're important, but we always have to understand them as fuel to drive ministry. And so that knowing the theology becomes crucial, but that in itself is not exactly the ministry, but it's tightly attached to ministry because it's the fuel
Right.
of ministry. And so that type of thinking really immediately put us in a place where we had to ask ourselves, what does that look like in San Antonio doing
Mm-hmm.
mercy ministry, the kingdom, how we're partnering with, how we're building partnerships in the city and the different directions that can take. And so I think that's in essence what the conference is trying to do. And I mean, I think with Ficker and Erwin, we're going to have definitely plenty of experience. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know those names, Irwin Ince, longtime PCA teaching elder, former moderator, General Assembly. He is currently serving as the MNA coordinator, the head of that work in the PCA, and Dr. Brian Fikkert, professor at Covenant College, co-author of When Helping Hurts. So you definitely have some men with some skins on the wall, and then in alongside of you, and that's it sounds like a great conference for anyone who is an interested and involved
Mhm.
in mercy work, but obviously it's not just deacons, right, that are called to
Oh, yeah.
mercy work.
Oh, oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think that I mean, when you talk about mercy ministry, I mean, we all have an idea of what that means. We think of poverty alleviation, or how do we help, people that come to us looking for assistance. And it is, in a way, it's very, very complicated, to say that we want to help people out of poverty, or we want to find them at the time when they need mercy. It actually, it's a really super challenging thing. And we have seen how it's not easy to help, to really
Hmm.
ask that question, to help. And so I think that's why these conferences are so important. Whether, whoever the speaker is, these are really challenging things that, on one side, they're in everybody's mind in the church. What do we do with this? But at the same time, we feel that burden. We also feel we get intimidated about the call, and
Right.
what does it mean? What does that look like? And I
Yeah.
think our reaction at the beginning, sometimes, to use the language of Fikkert, is we focus on relief in a way that that is just to help somebody in the immediate moment, but to really get them into a road where they might flourish because of the gospel. It's just going to take a lot more than that.
Right. Yeah. And I know that aspect of bringing the gospel to someone in the midst of helping, that's the key. And I think that's unfortunately right where we've seen the church broadly, in the United States, right, so often go down rabbit trails
Yes.
and wind up in the liberal ditch, right? They
Yes.
just become all about doing things for others
Mhm. Yes.
and lose sight of why we're doing things, and actually delivering the message of good news that,
Yes.
we care more about your soul than we do about your current economic situation. And while your economic situation is important, it's not the ultimate.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, the ultimately, the gospel, it has to be and remain in the center, because of this, the only thing that will allow a person to flourish. Because, from dead to sin, to alive in Christ, all of a sudden now you have a person that can be restored. Now reconciliation is real, and all those things. Yeah, if we were to do this outside of the gospel as a saving message, with a priority, we really would not be investing in eternal things.
Hmm.
I agree with that. Yes.
Yeah, and you, just circling back on the work of Redeemer, y'all have a conference actually coming up this coming weekend here, which, as we record, would be was it the 23rd and 4th?
This coming weekend.
Yeah, where you and Dr. Fikkert are going through a related
Hmm.
conference, to bringing the hope of the gospel to the needs of the city. A conference called A New Story,
Hmm.
and obviously, I think the messages sound like they certainly overlap, and
Hmm.
um, probably good preparation for the MNA event. But either way, the message is important, and the if you would,
Hmm.
how when someone hears, we got to bring the hope of the gospel to the needs of the city. How do you how do you take the city, a city the size of San Antonio, 2 million people, and say, "Oh my gosh, you know, I'm a congregant at Redeemer. I see that title, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the burden I feel, the things I must go do." Help me break that down to what does that mean for me in my life, right? Am I supposed to go out and try to solve everyone in, Castle in my neighborhood in Castle Hills' issue?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question, and one that I think a lot of people ask. and struggle with. And the part of the reason is because we as pastors and leaders haven't always known really how to lead through that well. But
Right.
I think that's the great advantage of some of the work that the Chalmers Center has done and Fikkert and others. I mean, some of the things that we kind of go in assuming or making sure that we don't assume, but rather know them, is that we're not coming to save anyone in the sense of fixing things or fixing challenges.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I like to always point to is right at the time of Christ's ascension after the resurrection, you really clearly see this great confusion and in the mind of the disciples because they don't get why he's leaving. They're like, "Where are you going?" And
Right.
they ask, "When are you to restore the kingdom?"
Right.
So immediately, I mean, you have this situation where there was not the same understanding of what the work was going to look. And here he is leaving, And of course, he tells them, now, before you do anything, don't do anything until you go to Jerusalem and receive the Holy Spirit and power. So clearly, that was one of the things. It's almost like outside of the Spirit, you will only be dangerous to yourself and others. So wait. But when the world kingdom is mentioned, there's also clearly a confusion there, misunderstanding, and the angel kind of makes it even more dramatic. It says, "Why are you looking up? Don't
Right.
look." And so you can tell there that how Christ was going to work and in the kingdom was very different as they saw it. And of course, we know that they saw it more of a political, social, civil thing of to end oppression, to end power that oppresses,
Right.
all those things. And even though that sounds great, it's almost crazy to think that Christ left and ascended to heaven without fixing the world, without completely fixing all these problems. So from that, one of the things we always remind ourselves is we're not going to save anybody. We're not going to end the world. We're not going to obliterate oppression and injustice, all these things, although they're important and we use that language and they're part of our ministry. We go in very much aware that there is a restoration that's coming, but that will be brought about by Christ himself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of gives us space and I think a little freedom to know that what we're called to is to, speak the gospel. And when it comes to mercy ministries, it means that a hope cannot just be a future hope. For hope to be hope, it has to be hope today. So we don't come with the pressure of lifting the whole city or changing everything in a radical way, but rather to share the gospel and to feel the pain with people right where they are. So mercy ministry, then, it's not a key to fix something, but it's a key to I would say it asks the right questions about what are the needs of people? What are they? Why are they hurting? Why can they not lift themselves out of this challenge and this mystery of life as they experience it when you think of gangs and incest, poverty? And so one of the things that Fikkert says in this book, Becoming Whole, which is his other book that came after When Helping Hurts,
Mm-hmm.
he focuses on what is the story of change. That's where the word story comes in. And one of the things that he says there is that everybody, whether if you're a pastor, a deacon, or a prostitute, or a drug dealer, a cartel member, you have a story of change that you're telling yourself and that you're acting in life with the hope that it's going to lift you up or get you to go forward. And so basically what we do in mercy ministry is to challenge that story of change that people have. And sometimes it means to point to, this is why you're in a hole of misery right now that feels overwhelming. And frankly, by themselves, they would never be able to get out of it. It's so heavy, so much. But by tweaking and challenging that, and asking what is the only story that can change you. And even though that change happens in the soul when you open your heart to Christ, the person is not transformed from a frog into a prince, but now they have really inside the power of the gospel, the spirit, a new story. And out of that, we can begin then to take steps and walking with them. I mean, the way Fikkert puts it, right, is relief, rehabilitation, and development.
Mm-hmm.
And the key is that the gospel is really what ignites that. And then we begin to work with people that would allow us to work with them, to that, not to learn what can we give them. The focus is rather, what are your assets? What is a possible vocation? What are the things that you think Christ has made you that you can do on this world? And there begins a journey that, of course, is long and challenging to then begin to help people by asset base, but being the gospel, of course, the thing that ignites all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's not right left American politics. It's not
Correct.
whatever our hobby horse is not where this conference is leading us. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And thanks be to God for that.
Yeah.
One thing that's interesting I see on MNA's website is that this is intentionally being listed as an event for more than the PCA. I mean, it's more than just seeking to bring our own into it and open to outside churches and everything. Um, are there anyone? Is it just the three of you speaking, or anyone else speaking?
In Dallas, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's good. Okay, so if anyone was concerned about other voices, you won't get them. We have three men from the PCA. Okay, very good. And it's Friday and Saturday. Friday night, Saturday. I think it's like all day Saturday, isn't it?
yes, I think so.
Yeah. I know there's a small cover charge to cover the cost for it. I think it's $59. I've got to sign up. A link will be in the show notes for that. But it's at the Northwest Center in Dallas, Northwest Community Center, which is just north of Park Lane, I think east of Greenville. So in that area there. Should be a great event, and hopefully you guys have a great turnout for it. I know information's been shared at a couple of our Presbyterian meetings, and I'm not sure what the expectations are to people to travel to Dallas, but hopefully you guys will get some from around the state as well that come in for this event. Yeah. The your work at the church in missions. So focus goes back to that just for a second. What is it like, thinking about the gospel as it goes forth, looking at how do we as a church, right? How do we faithfully carry out the call to take the message to every tribe, tongue, nation, people group? How do you go about shepherding, the work of Redeemer, the people who are interested in missions? They come to you and say, "Hey, Victor, I'm really sensing a call to go to this people group, right? I'm sensing a call to go to Chile. I'm sensing a call. I want to go to Thailand. I'm sensing a call. I'm going to go to Norway, wherever, right?" How do you begin to counsel someone who's considering missions work?
Yeah, I mean, I think that immediately some of the things that we like to talk about or explore is, what are the motivations? What's behind that? What costs that? If the Lord can definitely call people through different circumstances and challenges. Sometimes it's hearing a sermon, hearing the testimony from a missionary, or I mean, maybe even watching some media that's related to missions, and all these things are. It's important how it all starts, where it's coming from, and so I think that we always encourage people to realize that the Lord God calls people in the midst of His church and from His church, which is it's a community. It's not just an organization; it's a community. And so, how things are known, or how do we learn? How do we feed or continue learning about what this calling could be? Happens very much in a community. That would be versus because I took a class, or because I heard this one thing, or and so we immediately, somebody in the past that has happened to me. Somebody comes and says, "Yeah, I want to go to China. Lord's calling me go to
Right.
China," and I say, "Well, great." And then they kind of immediately say, "Well, where in China can I go?" They're like, "Well, let's not worry about that.
Right.
Hey, there's plenty of Chinese people here in San Antonio."
Right.
So, well, let's start here where, we could kind of learn in a safer, more, helpful context. And it's amazing actually how that, to some people, not everybody, but some people, that almost becomes, like a little letdown because, they're kind of thinking of it in a different way.
Right.
But actually, that is, I mean, the Lord has brought the nations to our doorstep, as we like to say, and
Amen.
it definitely, people find this surprising, but I think we all really know that. I mean, planning a trip for 2 weeks or a week to Lima, Peru, it's a lot easier sometimes than crossing the street to talk to your neighbor.
Right.
That can actually be harder.
Yeah, it's less risky to go to people you don't know.
Exactly. And it's easier to impress them too.
Yes. Yes.
So that's kind of some of the things we immediately want to, and so we want to be sure that we can encourage, not discourage, but at the same time challenge and help people think, and I think that's just some of the things we do. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's well said. And the your point about the Lord bringing the nations to us. I mean, that it is amazing to see, what the United States has become with people literally from everywhere around the world. And Texas is, right at the forefront of that
Yeah.
with, I mean, you'd be hard pressed probably to find a people group not represented here
Mhm.
in this state. And, the major metros are just bursting at the seams with opportunities to share the gospel with unreached people groups right here in our own backyard, like you said. Yeah, I know there's a community in Frisco that the developers are actually advertising in India.
Ah,
Come to this neighborhood in Frisco,
yeah.
be in North Texas with your fellow Indians.
Yeah. That's
This is,
amazing.
it's unbelievable. You never would have found this before, right?
Yeah.
And we have
Yeah.
it all over today.
Yeah. One way we've seen that is in our right here, South Texas, that there's a shortage of Spanish speaking teachers
Right.
in the school system. So they literally go to Mexico, to cities like Monterrey, where a lot of educated, high educated people, and they recruit, people to come and teach
Mm-hmm.
over here. And so it's amazing how much that happens, and the need is such that our government is figuring out ways of doing that. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it is amazing. The the Lord is definitely at work, and it'll be interesting to see how what role our churches and the PCA and our brothers or sisters in the NAPARC world as well, how the Lord uses us in the coming years as our demographics change, as we become more and more diverse.
Yes.
How will we take our Reformed distinctives and reach a very different populace than we have before.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that is a huge challenge. I mean, I would say that you can feel overwhelmed at times, and I mean, I think some of those challenges are because you know uh, the Hispanics in our cities that are not in our churches, you know, they don't have the same natural networks of people and family to sustain the faith and things like that. So typically, when a person comes to Christ from a Hispanic background, many times in our context here, it might be they're the first believers, or they might be the first generation that basically you know, when you deal with a culture of migration, typically that means that many are not in school, or many of them are depending on manual labor, which is obviously a good and more than legitimate thing. But when you think of the PCA, which sort of values, you know, traditional education and the degree, which there's a reason why we value those things, and we have a high standard as we well should, you know. And but how do we then take that and open a door through that without lowering the standard, without ever thinking we should do anything like that? We don't want to do that. But
Right.
how do we value the education, how they learn, and all of those things? And that's a real challenge.
It is, yeah, and just I mean the translation of resources.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a number of things that need to go hand in hand. You know, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to know of or heard the previous episode, but you know, Hamida Tommy, um, who is in Richardson, um, he just became the first ordained, um, you know, someone from a Muslim background, from Iranian descent, ordained in the PCA and as a teaching elder, right? And he, you know, he's doing a lot of work in translating. They're doing, you know, Farsi translation for Ligonier, and but that the need for that is tremendous in you know taking not just classic works of our Reformed history, but even you know modern day works that are major influential, like you mentioned, Palmer Robertson's Christ
Yeah,
of the Covenants. I mean, we need that translated in all kinds of languages.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah, the work before us, in some ways, seems overwhelming, but we know the Lord will provide for His
Yeah.
church. And yeah, well, brother, it has been a wonderful sitting down with you today and hearing the Lord's work in your life and what He's doing at Redeemer San Antonio, the conference you have this weekend, and then the conference MNA hosting again April 12th and 13th in Dallas, Restore 24 event. Um, you will be present at both, obviously, again, and we just pray that the Lord would bless that conference, that many would come to hear the message that you have, that the three of you have to share, you know, where the Lord is leading you and the work of His church and reaching reaching out to people who need lifting up in so many different ways, and obviously first and foremost, again, and so we've talked about already, is spiritual. There, we don't want anyone to be lost, and pray that all would come to faith and the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior.
Yes. You said that well, brother. Couldn't say any better.
Oh, Victor, well, thank you so much. The Redeemer San Antonio, I'll have all these links in the show notes, but is redeemersa.org on the web, and the MNA website, pcmna.org. but obviously the link for it's a little too long for audio, so we'll put that in show notes and have everything on here. Before we go, Victor, anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that when we just encourage, I mean, we are still mostly learning how to do this ministry. We don't think of ourselves as experts, or uh, but we just I just want to encourage people that this always looks hard, looks difficult, looks like maybe a high cost because of my busy life. But I just want to encourage people to not let those things get in the way of doing ministry, mercy ministry, reaching to others in the city and situations where it's challenging for them. And for us, it's challenging because we don't always know what to do. But that's part of what it means to help. We have to learn as well. And so I just want to encourage people to attend the conference or for look to those materials and allow them their hearts to be challenged by the Lord and His Word. And I think out of that, on the other side, we'll learn a lot. Our faith will be challenged, and sometimes we're gonna make mistakes as well. But at the end of that, when you find yourself in the kingdom and doing His work, whether you're ordained or whether you're a doctor or a construction worker, there'll be an immeasurable amount of joy in your heart. Will bless your life and would really, really give us true meaning for why are we here for Christ and His gospel. So, go for it.
Well said. Well said. Well, Victor, again, thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you and all of our listeners have a great day. We look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Thank you, brother. My pleasure.
All right. Thank you, sir.